Yes, we are live. So, this is your first time on Substack, my second time on Substack. And this time, I get to say welcome to the podcast, The Sovereign Edge. And my guest today is Michael Ostrolenk. And Michael and I have spoken about 2 months ago when I was guest in his podcast, Resilience Redefined. And it was such a great conversation and really great meeting you that we set this appointment for today. Really excited for the hour that we have. Michael, just to introduce you briefly, you are marriage and family therapist with nearly 30 years of experience in coaching and human optimization, something that we both share, like really this performance mindset and really helping people to get more out of their life in all areas of life. You spent years as master coach and head instructor at SealFit's Unbeatable Mind Academy. Is that right?
Yes, it is, yeah. With,
Yeah.
Commander Mark Devine over at SealFit, yeah.
Yes, wonderful. It's a training built for Navy SEALs and special operations. So, like, really, like, working at intensity levels. But what is so interesting that you brought this home into the relationship space. You saw, what is possible there to get out of humans or to enable humans, and then also seeing what is missing in the relationship space that is like largely neglected in modern
Yeah,
days. You run the so-called relationship dojo,
yep.
and you bring together martial arts, playfulness, self-awareness, and really, resilience. How to build that together. What I find striking is you define success not as title or bank accounts, but really by the quality of relationships that unites us. And so that's the territory that we're going to explore today.
Nice.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Um, so when we first met, we were speaking in the end about the modern zeitgeist of relationships and really the potential that we see in relationships. And it was for me personally at a time when I was really looking at what's happening in this world in spring of 2026, summer
Mm,
2026, where we have like an increasing shadow on what's happening in men in particular and how that is affecting relationships. And me being a woman, I really notice how it is affecting me in my day to day. And
mm.
before we go into that, I would just like to understand you have a brand called the Sovereign Gentleman. And I would like to know what is a sovereign gentleman and a little bit also help us understand your journey of, you know, being born, starting with martial arts, but then what made you to say, I am helping men to become sovereign gentlemen? Like what was your moment where you understood like something needs to change in the way I am a man or I show up for men and help us understand like the
Yeah,
sovereign gentleman.
certainly. I'll just do a little bio first, like, how it generated from me through my experiences, and then I can share with you how I define the sovereign gentleman. So, I was really fortunate to have a great therapist when I was 9 years old, and she taught me biofeedback, guided meditation, guided imagery, and encouraged me into the martial arts. So this is 1979, so the technology wasn't as cool as it is today, but for me, it was really neat. So attached the electrodes to the brain, and I got to look at a computer screen. And when I was stressed, the balloon would fall. When I was relaxed, the balloon would rise. Or I had galvanic skin response device. I put my fingers in. The more I relaxed myself, the noise would lessen. The more anxious I got, the noise would increase. So I got to play around with like what I might call today. I didn't have the language back then, like self mastery, managing my nervous system, managing my mind, managing the emotions and the energetics of the body. So that was kind of like my entry point into what we might call human potential or human development or all those kind of cool things. And literally, I mean, I can tell other stories, but that's kind of the driving force that kind of led me into the world that we both play in today.
You were 9 years old at
Yeah,
that time. That's like early on.
yeah,
Amazing. Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And and there's a bunch of experiences which we can get into that kind of move me in different directions and things like that. But let me just now define the sovereign gentleman. And I wanna say, like, I hope when you and I speak here, hopefully you and I speak more than in 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, stay in contact, but when you and I speak again publicly, maybe in a year or 2, I hope my definition is expansive, because 'cause I'm always trying to be kind of evolutionary in my approach. So what I'm sharing now is how I think about it now. Hopefully, it evolves over time. So let's break the words up: sovereign and then gentleman. The sovereign piece, in my mind, is twofold. One is sovereignty, is freedom. So how can I help myself and other men, but also women too? Because about 30% of my clients are women outside of the couples work that I do, free themselves up from social programming, meaning what Madison Avenue says, our governments say, Hollywood says, religion, ethnicity, nationality, geographic regions, a family of origin. There's a lot of forces that play that help us define ourselves and how we relate in the world. And no judgment. Those are all natural to us as human beings. And I'd never say like, oh, you should not be influenced by those forces, but I want people to recognize that those forces influence you and get so free or as free as possible that they can make a decision. I can choose to follow, those rules, those guidelines, those belief systems. Cool. I'm choosing to do so. That's awesome. But I'm not being programmed by them. I'm not operating unconsciously. So that's the freedom part of the sovereignty. But it's a means to an end. Like I want people to be free, but free to do what? And then I'm a like a developmental. My background is psychology, and I studied transpersonal psychology and somatic psychology, but I also studied developmental psychology too. And there are like 21 lines of development, that people can evolve into over time. And so the freer you are from all the programming, then the ideal is to like find out where you are with your emotional intelligence and then move up to the next level, whatever that happens to be for you. Where are you with your cognitive capacity? What's the next stage of development for you? Where are you morally? What's the next stage of development for you? And then I create the containers that clients then can do the exercises, the practices, and all the things to rise themselves up to higher levels of functioning, whether it's emotional or mental or moral or spiritual, whatever those things are. So that's the sovereign piece. And then I can go to the gentleman, but let me see if you have any questions just on the sovereign piece.
Yes, on the sovereign. So, first off, what you describe around sovereignty, I would say that I am on a journey on that, like maybe only in the last 5 years more consciously and with that word. So I'm really looking at what you share of like, oh yeah, like I am on that journey, but I just recently woke up to some of the programmings and so I am curious. You mentioned like 21 levels, and then also you spoke around certain areas and how to level up. Is that a model you developed, or what is that?
Well, and let me speak to something you said. That's awesome. You're on the journey, and I want to reiterate, it's a journey. I don't think I've ever met any human being at this point who's completely sovereign, who's free 100% of the time. There's stages of freedom, stages of sovereignty, and I don't think it ultimately ever ends. Maybe at some deep spiritual level, you get in touch with the soul, and you're the witness and witness all the content of your consciousness. Maybe that's the ultimate freedom. But in the 3D, I think it's always a journey. That's my kind of point.
Mhm.
So I was trained in Ken Wilber's model. I had the best experience when I was in grad school. I studied with Dr. Stan Groff when I was doing my postgraduate work at the California Institute for Clinical Studies. And for people who don't know, Dr. Stan Groff was an LSD researcher from the 50s and 60s, early 70s. LSD was criminalized here at least in the United States, and he created holotropic breathwork. When I was studying under Dr. Groff in grad school, he would give me Ken Wilber's books, his manuscripts, unpublished, which as a grad student who's studying Wilbur in grad school, I was like, oh my God, this is effing awesome. So I got to read his books before, a lot of other people did. And then I got invited by Ken to join his Integral Institute, his think tank back in the really early 2000s. So not only did I study Ken's work, I got to kind of play with him and a lot of the Integral Institute folks. So his model is one of the many models I use. And in it, there are at least 21 lines of development. Like one line is cognitive, one line is moral, one line is emotional. And each line of development, you go through stages, or you can go through stages, higher stages. The easiest thing to look at is like if you look at a child and then let's just say he or she is 5 years old, and you talk to them when they're 10, then you talk to them when they're 15, you talk to them when they're 25. You hope it's not always true, but you hope at least cognitively they become more complex in their thinking. They go from very binary thinking to a little more complexity in their thinking. That is one example of development on a particular line. Another one is moral development. You look at the developmental literature, and we go from egocentric as little babies and little kids, and egocentric is just like my immediate needs. And it makes sense because, if you're a baby, you're peeing, shitting, eating, sleeping, and you have immediate needs and you want to be taken care of, which is natural to the human being. But over time, if you're lucky, you can transcend your immediate gratification needs and you become what's called sociocentric or ethnocentric, meaning it's not just about you and your immediate needs, but about your tribe. And you can look at your tribe as your family, the community you live in, could be a religious tribe, different forces depending where you are in the world and where you're at. But, your ethnocentric is about me and my little group. And if you're fortunate, you evolve beyond that and you go to world centric. And world centric as a stage of consciousness didn't begin to emerge really till the Enlightenment from the Scottish Enlightenment. We can get into that another time, but like the late 1700s is when it first emerged as a human potential, and then it's grown. More and more people can access it now. But world-centric is not just about me. It's not just about my tribe. It's about all human beings. I could put myself in any human being's shoes and have empathy for them as a human being, despite the tribe they're part of. That's the next stage. And then if you're really fortunate, using the Buddhist concept of the Bodhisattva vow, you can transcend just the egocentric, sociocentric, and world-centric and be like being-centric or all sentient beings. So it's like it's not humans that you can be empathetic to, but it's all the Gaiac system and all the little beings that run around called animals. So that's stages of development that humans can go through. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, yeah. That it's like, and there, I think this is also like can be summarized as spiral dynamic, but it's like
Yeah.
more nuanced, right? It's like that similar framework. And
Yeah.
I'm just taken back to a moment that was, I think, 5 years ago when I did do a stages. You also used the word stages. I did do a stages test, and it was almost like a 6 hour interview afterwards or evaluation to figure out where on which stage or how often I communicate on which stage in my life.
Yeah.
And it was such a time
Mm.
investment. I was
Mm.
fortunate to have a coach or to have someone guide me through it. It was an eye
Nice.
open on a completely different level. And I think that is, to go back to what I said just before, like the initiation of becoming more aware of a sovereign path.
Yeah.
Because let's say beforehand was a lot of people pleasing and why do I not fit in, or how come, like what I say triggers all these people, and then like becoming a little bit of the permission around, and what if you just think differently, and what if not, there is only smaller group of people thinking that way, which doesn't mean higher or lower. It just gives you the understanding of it's okay that you think differently in certain times. And also you don't need to go to the medical world and instantly be neurodiverse. You can also just be,
Yeah. Yeah.
thinking differently.
Exactly. So how did you get introduced to Spiral Dynamics?
I mean, my background is business economics, and in the field of agile coaching, it's all about methods and trying to navigate the complex. Human is the biggest factor. So looking at personality tests, looking
Mhm.
at how to understand or how to put words towards differences in humans. I was fortunate to become, just help someone who wanted to get certified as stages or
Oh,
spiral
nice.
dynamic coach, and I was assessing that as a possibility for our company back then. So I had the privilege of being tested, but yeah, the test was, I don't know, it took me like 3 days to answer all the questions because the way I am, it was like this amount of text to write for every question.
That's
And
awesome.
therefore it was like a 6 hour assessment.
Huh.
I think, yeah, I would love to take it. I would love to retake it. But yeah,
Well,
that's how I started.
you'll appreciate this because there's Don Beck, who introduced me to Ken Wilber to get me in part of the Integral Institute. Don Beck is one of the two major. He passed away a couple years ago, but there's like two groups within the spider dynamics world, and he kind of founded and ran one of them. Chris Cowan is the other. But I got certified under Don, level 1 and level 2, and I knew Don. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of spider dynamics too. Yeah.
Yes, I find it so it's so huge, or it's such a big door opener and potential if you know how to work with it, and if you are willing to not just, let's say, look for a pill to swallow, but really
Yeah.
like show up for the work. Because as you say, like there are so many nuances and levels to look at, and not
Well,
everybody is
and
looking for
and I
that.
think it's
But
important. Sorry. I think it's important to note that these are all maps or models. Like, I think they're great, they're really interesting, but I don't hold them too tightly, like, "This explains everything." It explains it's interesting, it's useful, but I think, the cosmos is more interesting than that to say, "This is exactly how the world works." I don't
yeah,
think we know that for sure or we ever will, and I'm
yes,
glad about
yes.
that because it just makes life more interesting.
But it does give vocabulary that
Yeah.
other tests fail to give. It does give a complexity and nuance that others are are failing to offer. And let's say for me, the next puzzle piece in that was human design,
Oh,
just because
nice.
it's like different glasses, different color, less concept logic, but an understanding of there is more to it than our science can really put
Yeah.
into words. And so, mapping it from all different angles, that's really what's informing my understanding of the diversity of humanity.
Yeah, 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 and I love the idea of the glasses and these tools give you different perspectives, ways of seeing the world. I like that metaphor. That's really good.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. So, yeah, we have a little bit of an idea of sovereignty and
yeah,
and the models that inform you and that
yeah.
that you use. You focus on working with men, well, also with couples you mentioned, and women here and there. But what I really find striking is me being in the world of relationship coaching for now 7 years. Um, I'm looking at what do men coaches offer and where are they at, and you really offer for me a completely differently informed skill set and way of role modeling that I've been, yeah, looking to find in this world. So I'm really curious to hear more about your work with men and really what motivates you, because sovereign gentleman, not even the word gentleman is celebrated by many men around here anymore. Um, but I can assure you there's many women who are like, yes, that is what I want. Like, yeah,
And let me define, as I'm defining it today, the gentleman piece of it, and I look at it kinda 2 different ways. One is, what is the ethos that drives your behavior? Now, we're imperfect, we're human beings, so we might have an ethical system, and it might be imperfect embodying it, which is fine, and then you gotta keep, practicing the thing. But part of the gentleman piece of the thing is, like, what's your ethos? And what can you do to ensure or more likely to embody whatever the ethical code you follow? I think that's really, really important, um, for men to for humans to have, but for men to have, especially since that's mostly what I work with. And a part of it, and this goes to more of the relationship, the dating, the relation, partnership type of stuff. I talk to a lot of women, both friends, colleagues, and clients, and I'm just shocked. And maybe it's, I was born in the South, raised a different way. Shocked at how I hear men treat their female partners or when they're on dates. And it's as simple as, do you open the door for them when you open the car door, you pull their seat out. I mean, really simple to me, simple things. Do you walk on the edge of the street so you get hit by the car, not them? Like things that seem natural to me growing up. That's just what men were taught to do. And it's not that women are incapable of anything, but it's out of respect for the woman. You're a protector of sorts. You're protecting her. And when I work with especially my young men, like, I just had a conversation with a young man about a month ago, and he's starting to date this really nice woman. And I just started asking me questions. Well, are you meeting? She had to metro in for their date. I said, "Well, are you meeting her at the metro or the subway, whatever it's called? Is in Canada. I don't know what they call it up there. But and are you walking her from there to the restaurant? And are you walking her back there to make sure she makes it safely? And are you making sure she makes it safely home?" And he's a nice guy. Like he's a really sweet kid, young man. But no. Like, he didn't even like, he was not raised thinking that's what one should do. One should do. And that it's a nice
Mhm.
thing to do for a female partner that you're dating. I'm like, "Well, consider doing those things." They're basic, in my opinion, they're, like, basic things and literally foundational. Like, there's so much more to being a gentleman and engaging with a female partner, but at least just those basic things, women love those things for the most part. Now, I will say that I've talked to some women who don't know, like, for ideological reasons, don't like those kind of things, and that's it. We can have that interesting conversation, or they're not used to those kind of things. Like, when the man does it for her, she's like, I didn't know to act. I didn't know what to
I
do.
don't know how
Like,
to
I'm so
receive
not
that.
used to that." Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's so I'm German American, socialized in Germany,
Okay.
raised by, let's say, a strong, independent woman who, doesn't need a man to provide for her, right?
Mhm.
So, but my dad, American, he is the kind of man who will open the door for me, as you said, for the car. He will make me sit in the car for him to get out, walk around the car,
Yeah.
open
Yeah.
the door for me.
Yeah.
It as a teenager, receiving that, it took me really long to receive that. It took me really long to stay patient with that.
Yep.
But the older I grew, the more I noticed how little of that I have in my life where I'm living in Germany. This is like whether it is not efficient or whether it is that people don't even imagine doing that or whether I don't know what the problem is, but I like the older I grew, the more I started to appreciate that and the more I started to look for that in
Nice.
men who's like, no, that like this is my way of showing you I care for you, I love you, I want to make sure you are safe.
Yep.
Like I think about you and I do this. And it's almost like a little dance in the day to day that
Yep.
is filled with appreciation for one another. Because also for me to sit there and wait, it's my moment to breathe. It's my moment to, think of him caring for me. It's like there's also work inside of a woman happening in that moment. It's such a beautiful way that is not talking or, not debating about anything, just being present and allowing
Yes.
for being in this together. And so, yeah, I do feel that, let's say, every culture has their own way of
Yeah.
relating and their own
Yeah.
upbringing. And
Yeah.
being raised in a society that is more 50-50 and equality, these things can get lost
Yeah.
easily. And while we are now living in a time where we see that women's rights are rather removed than put into the forefront, I do feel that, there is different aspects to why it matters to educate men to think about the women in their life, not just their romantic partner, the women in their life, and start thinking
Yes.
about it in the small, small
Yeah.
to the big, big, because there's many rooms that women are not even part of, and the small moments where you consider her safety and where you consider your appreciation for her, they train you to think of her in the moment when it most matters. Yeah.
Obviously, I agree with you 100%. Yeah, there are 3 basic roles seemingly historically men have played: protector, provider, and procreator. And in my work, I say we need to update those for the 21st century because just think the provider. Women are independent, they make a lot of money, sometimes they make more money than their male partners. So there's less of the interest and need in many cases for the man to like be the 100% provider of financial security for the family. Okay, cool. That's great. I'm happy the women are working and doing their thing. That's awesome. But can we take those 3 roles and reframe them for the 21st century? Okay, if he's not providing financial security, what can he provide? What other types of security can he provide? Emotional security, mental security, physical security. Those are things like I want men to start thinking about.
Mhm.
Or the procreator. Not everyone's going to have kids, and maybe they've already had kids. So, like, okay, what is he producing? Because men are driven to produce something. Maybe they're not giving. Obviously, the women give birth, but like they're not impregnating their partners or their wives or whatever it is. But what are they giving birth into the world? What's their legacy? How are they affecting through their actions and creating something that has a benefit for their family or their community or how large they want to go? So I want men to start thinking about those things like, okay, the old roles no longer necessarily serve us, but it seems to be almost genetic in our DNA as males of our species. So let's evolve those concepts. That's also
What have
something
you
I consider and teach my men.
what have you noticed in most recent times as differences of men that, let's say, you coached 10 years ago to now? I wonder if you notice any differences. I have moments right now. Germany is very upfront reporting on generation porn addiction, which is they are talking about teenagers 7 to 19, a generation that is raised by porn basically. And I love that we are talking about it in magazines. It's really like
Oh, good. Good.
educating the masses at the moment about if you are not teaching your son or really it's your children about relationships and sexuality, if they have a phone, be sure someone is educating them, and you might not like what they are educating them in, right? And they are really like putting at the moment ads on television around, you know, checking in with your children. It's like a
Good.
political campaign on, check in with your daughter if she is receiving, unwanted pictures, or
Yeah.
if she is talking to older men, like check in with them. And I really find that powerful. It's like giving words to what's happening. But if I look at my coaching spaces and the men that I work with now versus 7 years, and then I imagine, okay, there's an entire generation socialized in that. They're going to be in relationship coaching classes, let's say in like 15 to 20-ish years. What are we going to deal with then? and
Yeah.
and me, as woman, I really am at the moment in this process of, do I want to continue working with men? Because I really, the gap is getting bigger and bigger at imagining what's happening in their brain and how to reach them. How to reach them if what they have learned was never about the heart, but always about dopamine. How to reach them when, they don't even have pictures of a male role model, which is
Yeah.
already the problem of this generation. But then also they have no image of taking care of women, treating women as more than an object. Um, so I'm curious about what changes do you already notice and how do you address the problems of our time?
Yes, I'm actually gonna come in sideways, but I will get to that, question you just asked. You used a word a while ago, presence, and one of the things I noticed that both both men and women, but mostly men that I work with my couples, is they don't know how to be present, let alone to themselves. That is the primary first thing they should learn how to do, let alone to their female partner. So I will hear from their female partner saying, "Yeah, we're in conversation, but he's on his phone. His back is to me. He's not actively listening. He's not asking any questions. Like he doesn't seem to really care what I have to share." Let me just step back to what originally said about being present to ourselves. What are our feelings? What are our thoughts? And what's important that I teach my men and women as well, but the men is like first develop the awareness. Because I will say we don't want to repress emotions because it's unhealthy. It comes out as passive aggressive behavior. It can come out as chronic illness down the road. You want to learn how to feel your feelings, but you're not free. You don't have to act them out. Yeah. So first piece of it is like the awareness piece. I think is so important. And then you develop the witness to the awareness. Like, oh, okay, these things are happening inside of me. Very valuable information. I should process it, look into it, understand it, all the kind of good stuff. I don't have to act it out, but I can choose to learn how to act out in healthier ways. And I would say those things are endemic in us irregardless of porn or the new technology we have, like 25, 30 years ago or 15 years ago, some of the same complaints because we're not, I mean, meditation is becoming a little bit more mainstream. So some people, or yoga, so some people have developed the capacity to notice, like, oh, that's my breath and my posture, and my muscle tone, and my thoughts, and clouds in the sky. Buddhism is prevalent enough here in the states. Like they get the metaphor. Like, my thoughts are like clouds in the sky. My feelings are clouds in the sky. They just come and go. Awesome. So there's a little bit more awakening to that, but not as much as needed to. And then you add in the porn piece, and let me say, resilience is one of the things I teach. And what I teach my men is resilience, what I call resilience 2.0. We call me and JC Glick, my co-facilitator of men's group, we call it 2.0. 1.0 is like, let's do hard things and be tough, and all that stuff is great. Hard physical challenges, like, I don't know if Jocko Willink is popular in Germany, but like, let's get up at 4:30 in the morning and push weights. Or David Goggins, a SEAL here in the States, he like gets up and runs 100 miles before breakfast. Hard physical stuff is really great. It's important. We'll get into that when we talk about optimization. But for me and JC, Resilience 2.0, part of it was like, are you able to sit in your own experience without seeking distraction? And most people don't. They go to porn, drugs, alcohol, YouTube, working out. Like they're always like, I don't like what's going on here. I'm going to go do the thing over there to distract myself. And I think porn as one example, but YouTube and all the things, Substack, all the things are also opportunities for us to continue to not to connect with ourselves, and seek distraction. And porn, and I don't even talk about the sexual piece of porn, which we can get into, but it's all like, I don't like what's here. I'm going to distract myself with that.
Mm.
And then we can get into the sexual side of porn, and also the energetics of the male. Like, the release, I have all this energy inside of me. I don't know what to do with it. So I watch porn, I jerk off, and I release the energy. Great. What if a man can learn to take that energy and on occasion, apply it in a relationship and intimacy with his partner, but also use that energy for productive procreation, not to necessarily have babies, but procreate something useful and real in the world to have a positive benefit for your family. Like, you can use those purposes, but if you're jerking off all the fucking time, you can have that kind of energy
We are
to
not
use.
taught that sexual energy is a life source energy that we can use in all areas of life. That's like esoteric knowledge to have, right? But and it's something where, let's say, I as woman, I was aware of that already early on in my 20s, and it's like, it's very unattractive to meet men, or even yeah, humans, to not understand that, or to not even have an interest in that. Um and also to be the educator on that, it's almost like, oh, come on, like, where is your own drive and energy to understand
Yeah.
yourself and your expression in this world? And it's really sad to see, so many who are just, yeah,
Lost.
lost, gaming, playing, watching.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Socrates, how many thousands of years ago, says, "Know thyself." Like, yeah, there are wisdom traditions in various cultures historically that pointed to us in
Yes.
that direction. We should re-embody those as on the sexual piece of the porn. One of the things I hear from women more recently than 15, 20, 30 years ago, when porn was less prevalent, or you could buy Penthouse, or use VHS tapes. It's harder to, you couldn't just download on your phone, is that they don't know how to relate to a female's body,
Mhm. Mm.
or her heart, or her energetics, or her breath. Like, there's just no seemingly knowledge, let alone understanding of, like, oh, what would please her? What does she want? And it's not just a conversation, like asking her questions, but listening. Listen to her breath. Listen to the movement of certain body parts, the juices flowing, all those kind of things. If you pay close attention, provide you very valuable information of how you can, I don't want to say service your woman, but, like, bring pleasure to your woman.
Yeah.
And porn just gives you this picture of, like, whatever the porn you're watching, like, this is how it is. There's no subjectivity there. There's no about the other person there. What does she want? Or even, okay. Yeah.
Done recording. That's great.
Welcome back to your show. The NSA is like, we don't want them talking about sex. We're going to cut this thing off. But my only point is, like, the porn is deep, is unfortunately teaching men the wrong lesson about pleasure in their partner and even their own pleasure. Yeah.
That's a part of where it's like women are also fighting for men when they push them to learn these things, because ultimately they are also harming themselves in the way they get lost in all these devices, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's where I feel that we are entering, from a women perspective, we are entering a new era of feminism, and feminism has always been about um, relationships evolving and has never been a fight against each other, but like we will all benefit by including more women and also including more of the feminine side of things.
Mhm.
But more so than ever now, women and feminism is like fighting for also really men to still show up for intimacy, sexuality, procreation, the own good of their own heart and well-being. And it's almost like the feminine has an easier angle to see these things and to see things go south and to address them. But it's happening at a scary rate in these days, where we're like, we are fighting for our own rights and we are fighting for your rights. We've always done that. Like, come on. When are we doing this together? And so that maybe takes me also to the second part, because
Yeah.
I've been thinking about the couple as longevity system also in regards to how do we reach the logos, the mind, the part where modern days, it's a lot of times it's about performance. It's about, how do I get more of life? We have a lot of men who are into biohacking, who are into the performance piece, and only later understand that relationships actually do matter. And then sometimes some of them will enter it from the angle of like, okay, it does affect my energy. It does affect, my longevity. So maybe I do look at it. But so sometimes I hope that if that is the angle, great. And what you shared as a 9-year old, how, seeing things shift and change, how what you do leads to numbers, to,
Yeah.
change. I felt like, oh yeah, that really speaks to the masculine. I mean, I also love wearing a whoop or a device and seeing data. Yeah, I also love that. But I've also quit it. I'm not
Mm.
wearing it anymore because I do want to strengthen my own, let's say, intuition and not be
Oh,
run by a machine.
nice,
Um,
nice.
but I do see the benefit, and I do see how at times I want to go back to it and understand myself better and increase the mind body connection. Um, and so, yeah, for me, it's a no brainer that relationships impact like the way our energy is, our well being is. I had epiphany moments where I had an argument the day before, and the next day HRV was just like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
unexplainably low, other than, yes, that argument really like hit right into my body,
Yeah.
leaving a wound there, and my body is bleeding internally, energetically, and it's right there in the data. And I understood more how a conflict leads to, you know, blood going out of the head into the body, clearly not thinking anymore. And it's so like the data is all there, but we are not addressing it and learning it. And I would love to hear, how do you use longevity, performance, for the people that you work with, and what do you see how
See,
it improves?
yeah, you'll get this. Many of the couples I work with, when I first start working with them, they don't get it, but they do eventually. So in my programs with all human beings that I work with, there's 4 pillars. And the first pillar is a physiological pillar: sleep, diet, nutrition, movement and fitness, stress management, and circadian biology. So literally, when I'm working with a new couple, I'll ask them about all those things. And most of them are like, what's diet have to do with my relationship? What's sleep have to do with my relationship? What's circadian biology, the 24-hour day and night cycle have to do with it? And over time, like for instance, for some couples, I'll have them do the Whole30 diet. I'm not a nutritionist, but I'm like, hey, you might want to consider doing this diet. And Whole30, for people who don't know what it is, you pretty much remove, the dairy, the glutens, or the grains, the sugars, and it's a really clean diet for 30 days. And then you begin to reintroduce foods for 4 days at a time. And what I'll find for almost everyone who's tried this, they didn't realize that how they are feeling is not normal. It's their normal because that's what they've gotten used to. But like irritable bowel syndrome disappears, A fogginess in the brain disappears, the knee ache disappears, their moodiness disappears for the most part. So like once they start dialing in aspects of their physiology, they feel better. Because if you feel like crap, it's really hard to be loving, caring, compassionate to your partner. If you're not sleeping well, you're not moving, you're not eating well. So like let's dial those things in. And then when I start doing the more interpersonal type work, their systems are more capable of actually doing the work. Because I could teach you for months of the effective communication skills, but if you're walking around like I feel like crap and foggy and my stomach hurts and you're not going to apply them fully and well, if at all.
Yes.
Yeah,
I oftentimes joke, right? Like if you are not sleeping well, if you are not eating well, if you are not training, then you can give me all your money and we can do all the communication training, but literally just put the money to better food and personal trainer and your relationship is going to change. It's like,
improve. Yeah. Let me
and
give you a
then we
fun
talk about the
example.
mind and communication.
I'll give you a fun example from like literally 29, 30 years ago, like when I first started, probably 28 years ago. I work with a guy, and I didn't have the 4 pillars. I wasn't as complex in my thinking, but I still asked a lot of the same questions because I grew up thinking these things. And I had a client who was tired all the time. I'm not a doctor, so go see your doctor. He has no medical conditions. He came back. I was like, nothing. So we were playing around with pieces of his life, but nothing. He still was all tired. And then he made a side comment about his allergies. I'm like, you have allergies? He goes, yeah, but I take Benadryl. And I always ask my clients, even back then, are you on any kind of medication? Are you on any kind of drugs? But he's thinking prescription from the doctor, not over the counter from the CVS or whatever it is. So he didn't think to tell me that. We spent months trying to dial the various aspects of his life in so he could have more energy. Once I found out it was Benadryl, that answered the question. So, like, yeah, like we need people to think more complexly, all the different variables that affect their psychology, including drug use.
Like so many factors that influence how you show up for each other
Yeah.
um and for me it's like even the environment that we are in, if you are living in a home that inspires you versus a home where that's just functional, it's like so many things influence our well-being that we are not taught and that we are overlooked, that are largely overlooked. And even when I look at, we have an increasing amount of people getting or getting the label or getting diagnosed with ADHD and
Mhm,
neurodiverse
mhm,
illnesses, but really unfortunately coming from the angle of illness and medication. And
mhm.
um, I I'm curious how that is going to shape relationships in the next 10 years. I'm starting to see like this is more common now than it was 10 years ago. What's going
Oh,
to
yeah.
be the impact?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm just looking at how it's going to unfold, but I do feel while it might help you perform and while it might help you in business, and we see that oftentimes, right? How does it affect your emotional intelligence and your emotional realm? And I'm not yet 100% certain it's always going to be for the better. I do
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
personal examples of antidepressants leading to, certain level of numbness and
Yeah.
unavailability. And
Yeah.
yes, you function better in the day to day. And it might pull you out of the mud, but also there is a consequence or a price to pay. And
Okay.
so I look at these things always with like, can there be an angle that is not medical? Can we solve this that is not necessarily, but that's a new aspect I'm fairly curious for the next years to
Well,
observe.
I gotta go find it. I used to give talks on ADD, like, years and years and years and years ago, and to families, and I would always say, "I don't know your situation, maybe medication is appropriate for your child at this particular time. I'm not here to judge that. Here are 9 things to think about before you decide to do that." Diet, nutrition. We didn't have the same screen times that we had, like, 20 years ago that we have today, but, like, the television watching. Yeah, that affects brain chemistry and the ability to focus, especially if you it's fascinating. If you watch TV from 50 years ago versus, like, now, it's much more fast. They're changing the scenes, there's a lot going on, yeah, which has an effect on the brain, the ability to focus.
Mhm.
And I would be like and for boys especially, maybe the institution of schooling, the particular school this child goes to is inappropriate for them, how they learn.
Yeah.
No wonder they're acting out. They're a boy, and no matter you know, there are the institutional questions like around schooling and stuff for little kids. And I'd go through this whole litany of things to consider. What's their diet? Because there's certain things that you might be eating that make it really challenging for your brain to work properly. Is your child sleeping appropriate to their age? Because children, especially teenagers, need more sleep than less. And we've organized our society against that, which is kind of backhackers. So it's crazy. And then the last one I always would say, I think that from an evolutionary perspective, you need a subset of human beings that always seek novelty because they're the ones who allow us to adapt to changing life conditions and move the culture forward for survival purposes.
Mhm.
You don't want to drug that out of existence. Like for the
Absolutely.
species level, you want to keep people always, like some set of them at least, doing that because they allow us to evolve over time. So, go through all these things and then make a determination whether your child might need a medication or not, or you as an adult.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's a very relevant one. Michael, we have 5 minutes left, so I wanna I wanna see, what have we not talked about that you would like to address still? Or also, I remember you also had a question for me, but yeah, I wanna hand it to you for what is there to.
Yeah. So I'd be really curious on your take on longevity, health, and how you see it and integrate it into your work with couples.
So the angle that I typically take is looking at conflicts because that is like the one factor that gets people's attention of, yeah, I really don't like conflicts. And I really would like to decrease the amount of conflicts, the intensity they have. And I speak about the consequences of conflict, where we have a lot of scientific data in regards to how does it affect your health. You are more likely to get ill. You are more likely to age. You are more likely to develop autoimmune diseases. And there is statistics on whether it is a big conflict, like the one that really like shakes the entire that lets your HRV decrease,
Yeah,
or
like you
is it
shared
the
earlier.
kind
Yeah.
of like everyday nagging where it's like not a big conflict, but it's everyday, and all of these conflicts have an impact on health.
Yeah.
And so that I see as a big motivation to understand that we need to learn how to navigate conflicts so that we experience more energy and hopefully more well-being and
Yeah.
longevity, and hopefully create an upward spiral. Now, I will say this is like going to the gym. You also call it dojo, right?
Yeah.
Between understanding it here and then showing up in the moment to really, like, let's say, let go, or to really try out something different and new.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like, that is the masterpiece of things. And then I have this device that you clip on your finger to measure your pulse.
Okay.
Um, so when I work with couples and we work in person, I really want to see how I want to show them their moment when they think we are in a conflict versus the pulse, and when the body is actually in, let's say, survival state and the
Yeah. Yeah.
blood
Yeah.
is getting out of the brain, because there's usually you are not yet there, you are not yet understanding, oh, we are in a conflict and really I'm not super conscious anymore.
Yeah.
So to become aware of you in an adult body are not able to understand that you are no longer the adult in the room. You are literally like in your amygdala is activated, fight, flight, freeze. And how do we get faster at pausing at that point? So
That's right.
that's usually my angle that I take, because not everybody is into hacking all the other areas of life instantly, right?
I,
Um,
I love that. I'm going to steal that because I will have some couples use heart math for
mhm.
those purposes, but that's so simple and easy. That's a good one.
Yes,
I like that.
yes. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Wonderful. If people want to work with you, how can they find you, and what do you currently launch and offer? I know you have like many things that you offer.
Yeah. So michaeldostrolenk.com has like everything that I do on there. I'm on Substack way too much. You'll find me on Substack. On your Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn as well. So I work with men. About 70% of my clients are men. I do work with about 30% of my clients are women for individuals. And what's fascinating about the women, almost to a person, they come to me because they recognize that they're wearing the masculine mask. They have to carry the load of the world and run everything for everyone. And they want to get back into their feminine, the energetics of the body, their intuition, their sensuality, their sexuality. And it's funny they come to a man, but for whatever reason, I attract women to do that. So I also work with women in that way. And then I work with couples. All my programs are 6 months in duration. I co-lead a men's group with JC Glick, so also 6 months. I do some corporate team building as well. And I also run Team Foodishin, which is a group that encourages people to do hard physical challenges as a tribe to build community and build out your optimization of your physical system and mental toughness and emotional resilience and all that kind of good stuff. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. And I look forward to future conversations, tagging
Yes.
along to see what you do
Yeah.
and how you bring the corporate, the teams, and the private individual, always weaving it together.
Yeah.
Huge fan of your work.
Oh,
Michael, thank you
thank you,
so
Priscilla.
much.
I appreciate you.
And I think when I click on end now, we are actually
Oh,
out of this call.
I'll see you on Substack. Bye.
Bye bye.